I'd like to welcome our moderator for the evening, BFA Computer Art student Sebastian Gatt, and our SVA alumnus and effects supervisor Johnny Hahn. So Johnny has produced and supervised visual effects on numerous television shows and films, including Smallville, Supernatural, Superman Returns, Spider-Man 3, Beowulf, The Chronicles of Narnia, Prince Caspian, and Star Trek Into Darkness. He was honored with a 2009 Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Special Visual Effects in a series for Heroes, and has been nominated for multiple Visual Effects Society Awards. He is now directing commercials in London, including one for Jaguar Land Rover, and most recently was a creative consultant for a new Wizard of Oz animated series pilot for Amazon Studios. Please welcome Johnny and Sebastian.
So right off the bat, I love that movie, like a lot. So right off the bat, Johnny, what exactly did you do as an FX supervisor on that film?
Before I go into that, just want to say hi to everyone. It's really great to be here. And just before we go into anything, I'm one person here, but there's hundreds and probably more than thousands of people working in this film. And even in visual effects, there's so many supervisors upon supervisors across different sequences of the films, across different shots. So, I'm just one of many. But in terms of what I did on this film, I was hired by ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, part of Lucasfilm. Industrial Light and Magic is probably considered, the company that started visual effects way back from Star Wars films, founded by George Lucas. I don't work there now. I was just there for a few films. So I was there as the effects supervisor for a few sequences of the film. It was some of the water battle sequences, a lot of the underwater stuff, the stuff in Alaska, and just various shots here and there. And so this was at the ILM studio that we set up in Singapore, and I managed over maybe 40 effects artists. And on top of me is a visual effects supervisor, then a senior visual effects supervisor. So again, a lot of different people. As you guys can see, there's so much work that goes into these shots, and you think of just the number of people that go into it, and really what it is. Any of these fantastic shots are a culmination of dozens and dozens of really talented people. And each of these artists, they tend to have a specialty in one area or the other. Some of them are compositors who work with putting the images together in 2D. Some people are 3D specialists. Some are 3D modelers that build the characters. Some are just designers. Then there's effects simulation, which is the area I covered, which deals with all the particles of water, splashes, smoke, explosions, rain, snow, anything that kind of moves in a liquid or a kind of smoky way. So in this film, the water sequences were considered the most challenging task. There had been some films up to date that had dealt with water, but when this film came out in 2013, there hadn't been anything quite to that level of complexity. Usually a film may have one or two kind of fancy water shots, but this was no holds barred. We had whole fight sequences happening, in the ocean, which was a big challenge.
Were there any specific problems that you guys ran into and had to figure creative ways around them?
Well, the water, of course, is complicated, but actually, and I'm going to speak on behalf of all the artists in Pacific Rim, because the challenges don't just revolve around the water, but one of the big things is you have these giant robots, and to give a sense that something is 20 stories tall is something that's really difficult because no one's really seen that in real life. You have no reference to compare it to. All we have are things we've drawn or animated in comic books or in anime. So to make these things really feel large was probably the biggest challenge for the film. And I think it works great. You really believe that these things are gigantic. And you can ask any animator that giving something weight and the feeling that it's not weightless, but something that has mass that actually hits the ground and feels like that's mass against mass impacting. That's the hard stuff. So they can only draw upon other things that move really big. So for the water to get a sense of the scale, we studied a lot of footage of icebergs crumbling. There's lots of great documentary footage of these massive icebergs in the Arctic that are collapsing, and you've got millions of tons and tons of ice just slamming the water and creating these 10-story tall waves. For the robots, to get a sense of scale, we studied a lot of destruction footage when they demolish buildings, when they detonate them, to give us an idea of just how big a cloud of dust should get, if a robot were hitting the ground, or what exactly does a building look like when it just it's getting smashed. So so we try to draw upon as much real world material as you can, even though most of it won't exist because there is no footage of robots punching each other. But we try to we see whatever the closest example in real life is, and we kind of extrapolate that forward.
To go a little bit into your roots at your time at SVA and going into FX, what was one of the main reasons you started to move into FX?
So when I was at SVA, in computer art, we didn't really have particular fields. The industry wasn't as big as it is now. So if you were a 3D guy, you just kind of learned a little bit of everything, which I think is still very important. Effects. So there are different departments in visual effects, right? There's animation, there's modeling, there's texturing, there's compositing, there's all these things. Effects is the area that is generally the unknown. It's things we don't readily know how to do yet. So fire and smoke and explosions and all that was always the thing that there was no just book to open to tell you how to do it. You had to figure it out. And I think as an artist, it was just the most kind of creatively exciting thing, or sometimes it wasn't a real world thing. It could be like a magic effect. I used to work on Smallville, and that show was all about every week some character with some new superpower that no one had seen. So it was a blank slate, to really just come up with something cool, come up with an effect, So I think it was that excitement of starting from something that no one had done yet or figured out, and kind of fulfilling that creative hunger.
Do you want to talk about your thesis at all?
So I mean, how many juniors and seniors do we have? That's my phone. So when I was a junior, we had to go into thesis preparation and everything. I chose a very different route, to do my thesis, and I don't know if they would let you do this today, but normally you have to come up with, a film of your own from beginning to end with characters, story, script. I kind of did all that and, did all the assignments and everything, but I kind of opted to try. I asked if I could work on this film. I had this friend at NYU who was doing a film, and he wanted to have some visual effects in it. And I said, well, I really want to do visual effects, but I don't have the budget to put together a film, with the cameras and the lights and everything. So we both kind of needed each other, and it was kind of a special case to let us collaborate together. And the task for me was if I could pull off doing these effects in, about before the year was over. And it wasn't, and the lesson wasn't just for me to do it, it was the task of leading a team. So I was able to work with some other sophomores and freshmen to help out, and they were fantastic. So yeah, I don't know if you'd be able to do that today, but it was really, really hard work. But as it should be, nothing is worth doing unless it's hard, or else why are you putting the time to, wake up early and go to class, right? You gotta should be doing something that really pushes you, and that thesis was really hard. Yeah.
Well, right off the bat, it seems that you went really hard for your thesis. From your 4 years at SVA, including what you learned from your thesis, how would you say SVA prepared you best to go on as an effects animator, effects supervisor, and even now a director?
Yeah. So, look, when you're in school, you think you're gonna do something. You have some crazy idea of what you might do, what you might become, and you can try to plan for that, and you can try to sort of, look up to all the people who may have done that before you. But I think what's most important is that you just you go after what you want to do. And so what SVA, what it did for me was it kind of equipped me. Not that I knew exactly what I wanted to do, but as with the kind of courses they had, I was well prepared for just kind of all the different creative challenges that might come. I didn't know specifically whether I'd go into TV or film or whatever, but nor should it matter that you don't be freaked out if you don't have a plan. Just do what you really, really, really love doing, and someone out there will honor that. Like in the working world, even in creative studios, they're not dumb. They're gonna pay people who are really who deliver, right? And so what I mean is, don't go after the job that pays the most. Just do what you want to do, and chances are you will work really hard at doing that because you love it, and then therefore someone will notice that, and will see how valuable it is, and will pay accordingly. So I know that kind of meandered off the topic, but but that is one of the messages I do want to say. Like, don't be too caught up in not getting into the right studio, or trying to get into ILM. I wanted to go to ILM since the beginning, but it took 13 years before I got in, right? So it's not about the studio, it's not about the show you're working on, or the caliber of games. I guess games are really big now. Just go, do whatever makes you really happy creatively, and that really creatively fulfills you. And SVA is, with all the classes you're taking and everything, just soak that stuff in, because that stuff is just, it's your toolbox, it's your palette, it's your arsenal to, go make what you want to do.
Also, we're going to be opening a QA for anyone in about. I'm going to ask them another question, and everyone can get ready. There's a mic on both ends that you can go to if you have a question. There's a mic right there. Yeah, everyone can line up while I ask. So you've gone from effect animating to an FX supervisor. You're directing now. You're based in London. What has been the transition like between those different areas of the profession?
So I mean, it's kind of similar to what I was just saying before, in that, there might be a certain, department you get into, or, there may be a certain job title, or a certain, whether it's a TV show or a film. And I think what's important in this, especially in visual effects, is don't get caught up in like, don't get caught up too much in like the software or you know what all these things that are so like mechanical and technical, because really the thing across any discipline is that it still taps into the same creative part of your brain, you know. Whether you're painting or drawing or in photography or animation, you know, or playing an instrument, you know, it's all just about relying on creative instincts, you know, and honing those honing that palette again, honing that toolbox of things, you know, knowing how to just creatively fly on autopilot, you know. So it, whether, you know, I never wanted to be an FX supervisor. I was just an artist, right? I was just a 3D artist. And actually, before I became an FX supervisor, I was asked to do 2D. I was asked to do compositing. Because when you work at small studios, you're just going to be asked to do whatever, you know, they're short of, you know. There's going to be some day where some guy's sick and they're like, oh my gosh, someone needs to put this shot together because it's got to go out at 3 p.m., you know. And it's like, okay, I'll try to do it. And so it's not like, oh gosh, I'm not a compositor, I didn't go to school for compositing, I went to school for 3D. It's all the same, you know. It's all buttons and all that technical stuff, you know, you can just watch some tutorials online. It's just tapping into your creative instincts, you know. And that doesn't change across any medium, even if it's animated or cell animated or CG or interactive or, you know, VR now, which is really big. You know, it's all the same. It's all the same thing. So basically, yeah, you may be asked to, you know, you may find a great job opening at some company, but it's not exactly what you were gonna do or hope to do. But don't worry about it. You know, just go for it and see how it works. And don't be afraid that it's not exactly the thing you were trained in.
Okay, so we're going to open up to some QA. Let's start over here.
So, when you made your, what was, first of all, you didn't explain what your thesis, the narrative.
Yeah.
Obviously, doing you know, getting into the specifics of technical effects and all is a challenge and something that is a great skill to have, no matter what else you do. But at what point do you want to loop around and make a film? Do you want to create the narrative and take it through the through line, or is it something that you want to do as a collaboration? Where do you see yourself moving? Because obviously in the school, the demand is for you to make a whole, an organic whole.
Yeah, that's very true. And so personally, for my career, actually ILM was sort of the last stop for me in terms of being on this visual effects track, let's call it, because this was in 2013, and it's since I had lived in London before, so I moved back to London to be a director. It's because I had this realization. It wasn't 2030. It was in 2010, where I kind of said to myself, "Okay, this is fun. This is great. We're making incredible things, and we get to dream up stuff. But is it really, you know, my film, or is it really my content, you know?" And at the beginning of your career, you're going to be asked to do something that's so far removed from what you really want to do, and you inch closer and closer and closer and closer to getting closer to your real creative vision. But, you know, at the end of the day, you're just a visual effects vendor for a filmmaker, right, for another director. So I said, well, you know, maybe the real creative fulfillment will be when I'm telling my own stories, not just per shot, because we're always told in visual effects, yeah, every shot has a little story, so, you know, motivate it with something, right? So I said, okay, well, what if I try to make my own films, right? So I was in Sydney at the time, working at Animal Logic, which is a great studio, by the way. They did Lego Movie. And I said, okay, well, let's try this out. So I read up on it. I took some acting classes and all this stuff. And then I got this call to go to ILM, and I did all that. And then I said, all right, well, let's really now try to make your own stories. So now I'm in London. I'm a commercial director, doing a lot of TV adverts, TV commercials, and I've got a few, films I'm trying to get off the ground. Yeah, and so, and that all goes into what I was saying before, like whether you're, just because you're an animator or a 3D modeler, it doesn't mean that you're not equipped to direct something. All these paths are just they don't exclude each other. Now as a director, I mean, I haven't directed. I did a few car commercials last year and things, and the first thing I realized, I think, when I kind of was in a proper commercial was, hey, this actually is kind of easy. I don't mean that in a boastful way. I mean that in a, like, the questions I'm getting asked as a director are like, how do you want to frame this shot? Where do you want to put the light? And I'm like, it's easy. Do it there, because it's what, I've been doing for the last, 10 plus years. And again, it's not because a piece of 3D software like Maya or something. It's because in Maya, where the light looks good, So it's not about the tools and the buttons and the software or your computer. It's about trust. It's about honing all these sort of visual instincts, And on a narrative level, especially for animators, all that time you're taking in, especially in your thesis films, of trying to get the timing and see if the characters really feel like they're looking at each other and really talk to each other without saying anything, all that animator stuff. Then you find yourself directing a commercial, and you're like, okay, I actually know how to do this, because it's all the same thing, right? It all boils down to, can you communicate a vision? Can you communicate? If you want someone to feel something, can I make you feel that? Whether it's the way someone moves as an animation, whether it's the composition of an image, whether it's the design of an image, they're all just parts of the same pie. So yeah, in that sense, and maybe this came out of because my thesis, it wasn't directly my narrative, but I am very much now pursuing making my own films, my own stories. So, cool.
Over here.
Hi, thank you for coming, by the way. So, I'm really interested in technical. And obviously you had to work at Singapore and probably also work with the San Francisco office at some degree. I don't know if maybe you had some artists in Cali and then some in Singapore. How did you dealing with these artists that are across the globe from each other, if you did? What type of management did you have to do? And if also on the pipeline side, were there any tools that had to be developed or to improve the communication between you and your artists?
I think I can talk to that while you're saying you're coming from a technical background. I can talk about that technically, but also like on a social level. So my first international place was at Animal Logic in Sydney in 2010. And boy, did that blow my brains, because all of a sudden I had to work with, especially in Australia, where there aren't that many local people of effects people. We had guys from Italy and France and Russia and Venezuela, and it's of course there's a language thing, which is not such a big deal, because we have such a visual medium that it's, at the end of the day, it's pedal to the metal, right? Or at the end of the day, it's money where your mouth is, right? Like, if you can show me the image, then it's okay if our grammar isn't perfect, right? But on a technical level, thank God for off-the-shelf software. Houdini and Maya and Nuke and all these things. They're global software. Animal Logic, their biggest struggle was trying to teach everyone all their proprietary stuff, you know. So carrying that further to ILM, in Singapore, which is an identical pipeline to San Francisco, like it's literally, the servers are cloned overnight, you know, for all the relevant stuff we're working on. Again, the biggest problem is like, oh my gosh, there's only like 20 people in San Francisco who actually know how this stuff works. How do you teach everyone else? So we actually did push really, really hard on this show to use Houdini for a lot of the, and a good percentage of the effects were done in Houdini. Mainly the ones where we had a lot of artists who had never worked at ILM, you know, ask, hey, can I just do this in Houdini? So, yeah, but luckily the way, and this was ILM's first big experiment with off the shelf. They've always had a big ego about let's use our own tools. But the way the industry is going and the way there's such good software out there, you know, every shop from, you know, Mumbai to Shanghai, you know, got the same software, and there's so much competition now. In a good way. I'm not saying it's bad at all. I actually think it's great because this is going to force the caliber of everyone to be even better at what they do. But yeah, I think the days of a lot of proprietary software are going to start to go away. But cool.
Thank you.
Yep.
Over here.
Hi. First of all, I would like to congratulate you on what you and your team accomplished in Pacific Rim because it's extraordinary and beautiful to watch. Secondly, I know that no script is ever shot exactly as it's written, and I was wondering whether, because of time or budget regions, or maybe just because of the pacing of the film, if there are any sequences that were maybe originally scripted or storyboarded, and then decided, well, maybe we can do that in the sequel. Fingers crossed.
Having worked on a few big effects films where whole sequences are sometimes completely CG, which, by the way, is why, again, there's no difference between like animated films and live action film. Like, they still make this huge, they think people have to know two different things, but it's all the same. But on this film, Guillermo del Toro is the director, who we all know comes from this incredibly rich creative background. And it was probably, aside from the internal issues, the most external issue-free film I've ever worked on. And one nerdy example of that is every shot is numbered, right? By the end of this film, every sequence was still shot 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, all sequential. Where like I've worked on some films where shots go from like 752C-B, and the next shot's like, 4. Like where they've rearranged it so much in editorial and patched it and just, band-aided it together to try to make it work. This film was really fluid because the director had a really, really clear vision of what he wanted. And this goes to the extent of annotations where they're not just drawing like, X, this is wrong, make it like this with an arrow. He would actually articulate, on his Wacom tablet, really precisely, oh, the bird should fly like this, and that was not only constructive, but gave the artist so much faith that this guy knew what he was doing. Instead of trying to like put it through your filter of like, okay, this director always thinks a little too big, so let me reduce it, in my head. But he was so clear. So in terms of what was cut, actually, a lot of sequences were cut that came back at the last moment. So the whole Sydney battle was cut, and in the last 6 weeks of delivery, it came back, and said we got to put it all together. That's why it looks a little rough. But the Alaska sequence where Gypsy comes out from the fog was a little longer. Yeah, it was very moody, and it was a Comic-Con piece, which was why it was rushed out. But it was a lot longer. But as far as I know, and it's not that I'm privy to all of it, to the sequences as well, there were no major cuts. And again, I have worked on films where like whole sequences after they've been finalized get cut. So yeah, that's all I can say about it. Thank you.
Okay, right over there.
So hi, I want to say thank you for not only coming up here and answering our questions, but also thank you for, helping create this wonderful film. I really loved it. It's not definitely not my first time seeing this. It's actually I think my second, third time.
I know that feeling.
So, my question is to you is, I am a freshman over at computer art, and along with any other freshmen that are here for that same major, what advice would you give us?
Okay, so it's a big one. I'd say, oh my gosh, there's so much. Well, what do you want to do? What do you, if you could do it tomorrow? If this is what I always say to people when they ask me something like this, if your level of experience, your talent, your location, your age, or your money didn't matter, what would you do tomorrow? Like, what would you want to be doing tomorrow?
I think
If all those factors didn't matter and you could just jump into the seat of something, what would you want to be doing?
I really think it would be mainly on visual effects
Okay.
or 3D modeling, but I'm kind of leaning more onto the visual effects.
I'd say then just make what you want to do. I was a big proponent of just going out and shooting. What if you want to do some shot of, I don't know, if you just inspired you and you want to try, hey, can I make something look really large walking down the street? Go shoot a plate with your iPhone, and download a stock model from TurboSquid or something, and just play around it. It's like exercise, right? It's like working out. Like, you only get really good at this stuff if you do it over and over and over again, and it accumulates, and you get a little sharper each time and a little better. And no matter how talented you are, nothing will replace that component of it. Talent, by the way, and this is very debatable, I think, sure, there are people who are talented, and there are people, some people may be more talented than others, and we're always praising each other for, like, oh, isn't he or she so talented? Okay, true, maybe. But that may be like, to me at least, in this day and age where resources are, at least, for, if you're in this building and you're in this school and you live in the city, yes, resources are available. That talent thing, I don't know, 10% maybe. The other 90% is just like, just discipline and hard work of just going and doing something and making it happen. So sure, we're always saying people are talented and this and that, but the lesser talented person can still far outrun the greater talented person. Meaning that little 10% of variability of whether they're talented or not, you can easily overcome with the other 90% of just enthusiasm and determination and just like putting pedal to the metal and just doing it. We spend so much time talking about what I want to do this, and I'm thinking of doing this project. And everyone's always got a project. Everyone's always got a thing that they've been planning to do, And as artists, we have the least excuse not to do it because we are the ones that have the craft, right? We are the ones who are the only ones who, by definition, sort of realize those things, right? You're not a producer or a manager or, all the other kind of roles that there are. You're the artist, right? You're the talent. So if you're not going to make it, no one else is. So I don't know if that's helpful, but it's just.
I think it is.
Just be productive, Just every day, instead of thinking about, or also like reading's good. Reading's good for you, but we read so much about stuff. We go through. I used to read Cinefex. I don't think anyone reads that magazine anymore, but and there'd be so much good stuff in there. But it's like, well, let's stop theorizing about stuff and just make stuff. You know? So, and this applies for any discipline, not just VFX. But if you're a sculptor, right, you can talk about a sculpture, but until you make it, it's not really there, right? So, anyway, yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. We only got time for one more question. Right over here.
Thank you. Well, congratulations, sir, and thank you for coming out here.
No
You know, so many films that have come out that have used water effects always look a little choppy and kind of fake, and you know, Pacific Rim really did a great job at making all that stuff stand out. What I want to ask you is, since water takes on so many forms, maybe fog, mist, or rain, and you know all the physicalities of maybe a solid mass like the ocean, what was most challenging for you and your team to animate? Like one scene with Otachi actually leaving the ocean and then going into the city, you see so many culminations of animation going on, from it falling off like organic matter to it misting around and then the rain going on. To me, I thought that was one of the most fascinating scenes, to see all that kind
Yeah.
of stuff going on with the water effects. To you, what was the most challenging, and what did you gain out of that challenge?
Yeah. So, yes. So water's really, you know, as we know, is very hard, but there are lots of things that are easy, right? Doing fog is really easy. Doing falling rain is pretty predictable and easy to do. So on a shot like that, which was done at San Francisco ILM, but the same pipeline as the other shots, it's split into 12 different artists. There's one guy doing the rain, one guy doing the fog, one guy doing the drips off of the cascade, as we called it. We have one guy doing, what did we call it? We call it like the compact water, which was not the white water, just the base ocean, right? And another guy deals with the white water off it. And it's not like they're assigned by expertise. It's literally like, who's free? Okay, this person's assigned this person's assigned that. And you just fall into one box in this massive spreadsheet, and they just try to fill in the blanks. So the key is, and this is really the visual effects supervisor's job. I mean, it is the effects supervisor's job, but at the end of the day, the VFX supervisor needs to make sure that all those elements, although they're done by 12 different people, feel like they're done by one, essentially, or done naturally, right? And that is the art of having a kind of a total vision for it, you know, and it's tough for the effects guys, or even whether it's the effects department or one of the 12 people on that shot, because there's so many egos, right? Even the guy doing the little bits of cascade wants it to be the most amazing cascade ever, so it'll always be like way too much, you know? And, you know, and that's the professionalism of being an artist on a team, is knowing that your effect is less is more, right? The subtlety of that water dripping off is what needs to happen. And so a part of it is management. If a good VFX supervisor needs to crack heads and say, I know you really love it, but you got to dial it down. And understanding the balance, and that an effect can be so faint that, frankly, you probably can't even see it sometimes. The subtleties in it, you know, the little pinch of salt, you know, is it's those little touches that really seal. It's like a glaze that kind of like ties it all together. And the other thing is lots and lots of cheats. Like, you think about if you have any live action filmmaking experience, if you ever worked on a set, and this is actually something I recommend too, for anyone going into VFX, get yourself on a film set. Go sign up for someone's short film as a PA, because when you see how something is filmed and you see the incredibly ridiculously fake way we film things, I mean, in VFX, you always hear about continuity, like, oh, the sun's on the wrong side, and it's really silly, because in a live action film, if you shoot an outdoor scene, right, you're shooting 12 hours during the day to fill in 1 minute of film screen time, right? And you see that sun, like, you know, going from one side to the other, but it's daytime, and really that's all you need to accept when you watch a film. that, okay, the sky is still blue during the whole shot, you know, and it's about accepting what people, even if they do notice, do they care, right? So a lot of times we know the scale isn't realistic. We know the water can't really do something, but it's about knowing that film suspension of disbelief of what is passable in the audience's mind, and not just any audience, but the target audience, right? And so the other thing is, like, you know, all those droplets of water on the lens, all the camera shakes, all the incredibly, like, convenient timings of something wiping out the camera at a certain frame. All those things are there to hide a multitude of sins, you know? But so goes in filmmaking, right? Like, an editor cuts around really bad performance, right? You know, they'll take snippets and snippets of little passable. If you have a really bad actor, then the editor is, and if you make him look good, that you have a good editor, because they're just able to make something that in real time, you know, to objective viewers, that it would look awful, but somehow the editor makes that work by the choices he makes and what he chooses allows you to see, allows a viewer to see. And so, yeah, it's not perfect. I mean, if you don't look too closely at those shots, because there's so much weird and incorrect stuff in there. But does it pass? Yeah. And with sound, you know, oh yeah. Yeah, so.
All right, well, thank you, and good luck with all of your future endeavors.
Cool, thank you.
So that's it. One more clap for John.
Yeah.
Specific problems that you guys ran into and had to figure creative ways around them.
Well, the water, of course, is complicated, but actually, and I'm going to speak on behalf of all the artists in Pacific Rim, because the challenges don't just revolve around the water, but one of the big things is you have these giant robots, and, you know, to give a sense that something is, you know, 20 stories tall is something that's really difficult, because no one's really seen that in real life. You know, you have no reference to compare it to. All we have are, you know, things we've drawn or animated in comic books or in anime. So, you know, to make these things really feel large was probably the biggest challenge for the film. And I think it works great. You know, you really believe that these things are gigantic. And you can ask any animator that giving something weight and the feeling that it's not, you know, weightless, but something that has mass that actually, you know, hits the ground and feels like that's mass against mass impacting. That's the hard stuff. So they can only draw upon, you know, other things that move really big. So for the water, to get a sense of the scale, we studied a lot of footage of icebergs crumbling. There's
I'd like to welcome our moderator for the evening, BFA Computer Art student Sebastian Gatt, and our SVA alumnus and effects supervisor Johnny Hahn. So Johnny has produced and supervised visual effects on numerous television shows and films, including Smallville, Supernatural, Superman Returns, Spider-Man 3, Beowulf, The Chronicles of Narnia, Prince Caspian, and Star Trek Into Darkness. He was honored with a 2009 Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Special Visual Effects in a series for Heroes, and has been nominated for multiple Visual Effects Society awards. He is now directing commercials in London, including one for Jaguar Land Rover, and most recently was a creative consultant for a new Wizard of Oz animated series pilot for Amazon Studios. Please welcome Johnny and Sebastian.
So right off the bat, I love that movie, like a lot. So right off the bat, Johnny, what exactly did you do as an FX supervisor on that film?
Before I go into that, I just want to say hi to everyone. It's really great to be here. And just before we go into anything, lots of great documentary footage of these massive icebergs in the Arctic that are collapsing, and you've got millions of tons and tons of ice just slamming the water and creating these 10-story tall waves. For the robots, to get a sense of scale, we studied a lot of destruction footage when they demolish buildings, when they detonate them, to give us an idea of just how big a cloud of dust should get, if a robot were hitting the ground, or what exactly does a building look like when it just it's getting smashed. So yeah, so we try to draw upon as much real-world material as you can, even though most of it won't exist because there is no footage of robots punching each other. But we try to we see whatever the closest example in real life is, and we kind of extrapolate that forward.
To go a little bit into your roots at your time at SVA and going into FX, what was one of the main reasons you started to move into FX?
So when I was at SVA, in computer art, we didn't really have particular fields. That the industry wasn't as big as it is now. So if you were a 3D guy, you just kind of, I'm one person here, but there's hundreds and to probably more than thousands of people working this film, and even in visual effects, there's so many supervisors upon supervisors across different sequences of the films, across different shots. So yeah, I'm just one of many. But yeah, in terms of what I did on this film, I was hired by ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, part of Lucasfilm. Industrial Light and Magic is probably considered, the company that started visual effects way back from Star Wars films, founded by George Lucas. I don't work there now. I was just there for a few films. So I was there as the effects supervisor for a few sequences of the film. It was some of the water battle sequences, a lot of the underwater stuff, the stuff in Alaska, and just various shots here and there. And so this was at the ILM studio that we set up in Singapore, and I managed over maybe 40 effects artists. And on top of me is a visual effects supervisor, then a senior visual effects supervisor. So again, a lot of different people. As you guys can see, there's so much work that goes into these shots, and you think of just the number of people that go into it, and really what it is. Any of these fantastic shots are the culmination of dozens and dozens of really talented people. And each of these artists, they tend to have a specialty in one area or the other. Some of them are compositors who work with putting the images together in 2D. Some people are 3D specialists. Some are 3D modelers that build the characters. Some are just designers. Then there's effects simulation, which is the area I covered, which deals with all the particles of water, splashes, smoke, explosions, rain, snow, anything that kind of moves in a liquid or kind of smoky way. So in this film, the water sequences were considered the most challenging task. There had been some films up to date that had dealt with water, but when this film came out in 2013, there hadn't been anything quite to that level of complexity. Usually a film may have one or two kind of fancy water shots, but this was no holds barred. We had whole fight sequences happening, in the ocean, which was a big challenge.
Were there any